Buenos días. Bienvenidos.
Good morning. Welcome everyone to our first Digital Citizenship Summit. Today we're going to be hearing 4 words that they're going to repeat all the time. 2 of these words are very famous these days. One of them is digital and the other one is education. We hear every day about the digital world and its implication in the business world. We hear every day about topics that have to do with education and every day. There are other 2 words that are also very common but are less in today, which are responsibility and dialogue. Responsibility. It's hard for us to accept that in the connected and digital world, we also have responsibilities that are unacknowledgeable for what we do. It's not enough to consider that responsibility lies in others. Dialogue is hard for us to carry out because dialoguing is not only listening, it's not only talking, it's also listening to find consensus with people who think differently from us. This dialogue really in relation with education and digital world is the foundation of this summit. DigCit Summit is an opportunity to break the silos, for us to talk about together different people from different fields, experts in different fields, so we can find in this dialogue a consensus and a positive message that will deliver change. Because we talk about children, teenagers and technology, and this creates a lot of uncertainties, and we are used to dealing with this topic in a reactive way instead of a proactive way. We educate based on prevention, and we need to educate our children so that they can be ready from an intellectual and social viewpoint to face the world that they're going to face, but never forgetting that we are people. It's not the app, the social media, it's the person who is going to make the decisions on the internet. So I encourage you to take part of this dialogue. I think it's more interesting to listen to what you have to say. I want to thank everyone who's been supporting DigCit Summits. Thank you to Fundación Telefónica and Rosetta Stone, Educatec, Vocento, and the websites Empantallados and Dialogando. Thank you for all the speakers who have accepted to be here today. Thank you to the children who are here today so we can hear their voices. And thank you to all the people who are here and who are following us on streaming through the website. Thank you to the Instituto de Ciudadanía Digital, Digital Citizenship Institute, who have come from across the ocean to be here with us. Thank you to my children. Some of my children are here today, and they are my inspiration every day with the use that they want to make of the screens, so that I want to be the first person to educate them, to inspire them, to guide them, so I can help them really handle the world in the future. The first person who is going to tell us something today is Alberto Hernandez, who is working for INCIBE and works to make us aware of the importance of accompanying teenagers and youth generations in a safe and positive use of technology that surrounds them and will surround them in the future. I hope that this is interesting for you and that you can talk about these things here, and also when you go back home about how to reach success in these fields. So I'll leave the floor to Alberto. Well, thank you very much, Maria. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this summit. I would like to thank Maria and the whole team of Citizenship Institute for organizing this forum, and every one of you for participating in it today and work towards cybersecurity and the protection and safety of our younger citizens. I would like to tell you 3 things. The first one has to do with technology itself. We agree all that technology and the technological development is opening a new world of opportunities that has to do with the way we communicate. If we look back, it was unthought of a few years ago. The way that we communicate today, where thousands of kilometers away from each other, we can keep in touch with our friends and relatives In the health sector, for instance, technology is providing us with tools that allow us to have early diagnosis and to move forward in medicine. Technology allows us to improve communications through the air, maritime communications, land communications, and detect plagues, control floods, etc. So technologies are a great step forward for our society, and it's transforming society as a whole. But we also know that technologies and the internet come with certain risks and threats that we need to be aware of and learn how to handle. This is very important. It's the role of all of us, for us who work in the public administration and also of the whole of the society and the people who are present here today. These risks need to be known, and they need to be handled in an appropriate manner. If we look back, if we think about the WannaCry and the crisis that we had back in the month of June, great share of the population is aware of the concerns that technology entail, and that technologies can be dangerous. But we need to work now in not being concerned, but in occupying ourselves in learning how to protect ourselves and how technologies work. One of the examples of this would be this forum and the initiatives in the INCIBE. Last year, we created the project Safe Internet for the Minors. This is a center that assesses and gives counseling to parents and children and schools, and even it gives support to children when they are victims of cyber threats or cyber bullying. We do many things with you. We have cyber collaboration program where every professional, every person can participate in this mission of bringing cybersecurity to minors. We offer lectures, we have contests, because this is an opportunity for minors and our children to develop their professional careers in this new field that is growing greatly and that will create many jobs in the future. Also, I wanted to say that when we talk about technology in the digital field, we should not forget about the analogical side. We are convinced that technologies not only bring us many progresses and advances in medicine and all sorts of fields, but they can also contribute to improve societies. We can work for gender diversity and incorporating women into this new careers, also to fight sexism and violence. So we can also use technology from that point of view, and let's work together. Just to finish, I would like to thank you all for being here today and to participate with us, for those who are already doing it. And if you haven't yet, I encourage you to do so in the future so we can work together in developing technology in a safe way. So thank you, everyone, and thanks for everything. I'm sorry, but we cannot hear without the microphones.
Hola, DigCit Summit Spain. So happy to be with you today. I am here today as a mother, I'm here as an educator, and I'm really here as a human being. And the one thing that I have learned on this journey is that there are more things that make us the same than make us different. And today I'm here to share our story as a mother and son. And later today, my son will share his version from the perspective of an 11-year-old. So I wanted to start very quickly by kind of embarrassing myself. Back in the 1980s, Farrah Fawcett, I don't know if Farrah Fawcett was as big as she is back home, but it was very important to have Farrah Fawcett 1980s hair. Took a long time to get ready in the morning. And when I was a teenager, if I was punished, number one, I lost the telephone. Oh, that was when the telephone, there was one in the house. And it had a very long cord that you would pull as far as you could around a corner to try to have like a private conversation. That was number one. If you lost the phone, that hurt. Number two was the boom box. They took away the radio. No music. Ouch. But number three, if I was in trouble, this hurt the most. They took away the curling iron. And the curling iron really affected how I looked as a teenager. So this picture from the 1980s is a reminder of how everybody was very awkward, right? We were all awkward, no matter how you look at it. And the thing about being an adolescent is every single day we're asking questions. Who am I? How do others view me? And where do I fit in? All day long, no matter where you live, every teenager back in the 1980s and even today, they recycle those three questions. Who am I? How do others view me? And where do I fit in? And so my story really begins as a very awkward adolescent. And I think that understanding, I didn't have my first email address until 1998. So this is not the world that I grew up in. This is not my language, but I have a comfort level because I remember what it was like to be an awkward adolescent. So my teaching career began in 1993 as a middle school teacher. So I was working with students that I really understood because I remembered what it was like to have Farrah Fawcett hair, to lose the telephone, to lose the boombox, and to lose the curling iron when I was in trouble. So today's adolescents, nothing really has changed. Maybe the look has changed, but the idea of trying to figure out who we are, how others view us, where we fit in. Now these conversations are happening online. And this is the really important part. As a mother, as an educator, as a human being, we need to be a part of this conversation with our children. So I'm going to fast forward to, really fast forward, to 2005 when I was a faculty member at the University of St. Joseph in West Hartford, Connecticut. And I was teaching teachers, both at the undergraduate and the graduate level. I was the faculty member on record for the educational technology program. And at the time, I saw that school districts were trying to keep up with each other. One school district went, oh, we're going to go one-to-one. We're going to get iPads for all of our students. And the next district neighboring town would say, oh, ho, ho, we're going to go one-to-one and we're going to get iPads or devices into the hands of kindergartners. And then what happened was there was no plan. And kids were doing, bad things. And kids were getting into trouble. And we would get a phone call at the university. Can you come in? Can you talk to our parents? Can you talk to our teachers? Can you help us come up with a plan? And the problem was in the early 2000s when this onset of technology, everybody was trying to keep up. And no one had a plan. And so I was the first faculty member on record to create a course specifically on digital citizenship. So to me, digital citizenship, how to be safe, how to make ethical decisions, how to be savvy, how to use tech for good, all of those things have to lead the conversation. So this is a course that I taught in actually 2011. I used to be a brunette. You can see, you'll say, who's that woman in that picture? I used to be a brunette, but I created this course called Pleased to Tweet You. Are you a socially responsible digital citizen? And my thought was we could come up with a student solution towards cyberbullying, because at the time, for the media, all the newspaper headlines, so they were sensational. These students, everyone was committing suicide because of being cyberbullied. And I remember, in particular, there was one suicide that really struck me. Tyler Clemente. He was a college freshman at Rutgers University, and his college roommate privately recorded a romantic event and live streamed it. And Tyler Clemente took his life. I don't know Tyler Clemente. I don't know his family. But for the first time, I was a relatively new mother. I thought Tyler Clemente could be my son. He could be my brother. He could be my cousin, my next door neighbor. But no matter what, Tyler Clemente is a human being. And so the It Gets Better campaign came out in full force. And everyone was uploading videos, letting people know, kids know, teens know, it gets better. But I got mad. Because why should anybody have to wait? Like, what could I do as one person? What can I do right now to make a difference? And this is when I started creating these courses. So this particular course I was hoping for a student solution towards cyberbullying. And the beautiful thing, do I have teachers in the audience? Because I took a back seat with my students. And instead of telling them how to do this, I let them drive the curriculum. I knew I wanted some student solutions. But what they said was, before we come up with a solution towards cyberbullying, we really need to know and be able to identify, what does it mean to be a citizen in the 21st century? And so today, I'm going to share my definition of digital citizenship, which originated from this course, from students, my college freshmen, and we connected with high school juniors in Birmingham, Alabama. That teacher in the corner is Beth Sanders from Birmingham, Alabama. She was a second-year teacher. I'd never met her. We only connected over social media through Skype and Twitter and blogging. The classes connected, and the two classrooms full of students, decided that to be a citizen in the 21st century, you need to think and act at a local, global, and digital level simultaneously. So to me, digital citizenship is all about community. And this really was the start of my journey. And now at this time, my son is just a toddler. And if I had problems with a babysitter, like they're sick, they couldn't come, what happened? You came to class. He came to class with me. And so very naturally, he was part of these conversations. And then when he would come to class, students would be like, hey, I want him to be my partner. Will you be my partner for class today? And he would join this conversation. And so from my perspective as a mother and an educator, all of a sudden he became to get more and more mentors in his life, his digital life. If you go on YouTube, my college freshmen and the high school juniors created a video. So the problem with going to a university, the more money you pay to go to school, the less time you go to school. So my semester ended at the beginning of December, and the high school juniors were like, we don't want this to end. So I hustled. I put together my very first live streamed event on my campus with a live audience and a virtual audience. And they created this video. And I'll make sure that I tweet out this video. It was called the iCitizen Project. And this was at first. So the semester was fall of 2011. And this live stream event was February of 2012. And this is the very first chapter to the DigCit Summit. Okay. As a mother, and this slide is actually in current slide, the beautiful thing is that we have continuously learned side by side. So you're supposed to be 13 years old when you're on social media, but we know that our kids fake that birth date so they can get on early. But what we've been trying to do is follow the rules and have a mother and son account, kind of like driver's ed. So you don't get the keys of the car until you know the rules of the road. And so we've been doing this simultaneously side by side. And it is the best type of education. If I could recommend anything, it is to have this open conversation on a daily basis. And we've gone to so many different locations. We've been with so many different people from all ages. And it's a continuous learning opportunity. And it's not like I have somebody, all of us, we can't call a sister or a brother or a parent and say, how did you do this when that happened? We are like, this is the new frontier, and we're doing this together. And I know for that introduction, the idea of that we're better together, we are definitely better together. So as the mother and son team, what we try to do is we go to different locations, And we try to engage as many people as possible into this critical conversation. And so we've done Twitter chats where you can see us. We're side by side with dueling laptops. We've been on stages together. But the problem is, can you just stand up for a second? When he started, he was just a toddler. And now when we go places, he's on his own, telling his own story. But our story began as mother and son, and our very first summit was in October 2015. And I was giving the closing remarks, and as I was going up on stage to give the closing remarks, he followed me on stage. And I said, "Do you have something to say?" I said, "Okay, all right." So I forgot what you get a pivot, and I knew what story he wanted to tell. So I kind of led the questions. I fed him the questions. He responded. Then he leaned into the microphone and he said, "Thank you very much." And from that very first summit in October of 2015, I was still a faculty member on my college campus. He's been involved in every single summit and has really brought the idea of student voice. So I know a lot of times adults will say that students are supposed to be seen, not heard. But in today's digital age, where we're living online, offline, it's all kind of messy, we really need to have student voice at the forefront. And these conversations around kitchen tables, at the bus stop, even when I'm in the coffee line, I try to engage, talk to anybody that is willing to listen, to get more people involved in changing the narrative. So these are just some things that we've been lucky enough to do. We've been lucky enough. I'm glad you've given me my time because I can talk underwater. Has anybody participated in the Skype-a-thon? So one tool is just fabulous to learn about the world, with the world. I know my son will be talking about that, is you get to connect with other classrooms. Now, he'll tell you his story. He doesn't get to learn this way at school. He gets to learn this way at home. So he has access at home and not at school. And then what we've learned over our journey are there are students that don't have access at home and they don't have access at school. So as a mother and son, we really are passionate about making sure that all students everywhere have access to learn about the world with the world. So one easy way, one tool is to use Skype in the classroom. The other is, there are classrooms that will use Twitter and host Twitter chats. There's one, Rachel Murat. She's in New York. She teaches high school. Her students, it'll be an early morning because high school back home starts earlier than middle school or elementary. And they'll hold these chats, and educators and students all around the world, because of the time difference, will be able to join. And it's just really powerful when you see these connections and just ways to collaborate. And so if I'm going to summarize, and if there was anything that I could try to highlight, is number one, how much kids count, and that their voice has to be at the center of absolutely everything that we do. The idea of the heart of being human, and I think I opened with that. There are more things that make us the same than make us different. And if we can see that humanity, that even though there's a screen in front of me, there is a human being on the other side of that screen, and that we can never lose, the fact that this is about being human. The idea of being better together and making those connections through social media tools in a really positive way. Media will always have those highlight the negative stories. We want to highlight all the awesome things, the wonderful ways that kids and adults, and sometimes our adults in this world, don't give us great examples about how you can use tech for good, social media for social good. And that last one, I love the idea of skipping stones. Not that I can, but I love the imagery. I only just get a plop. But the imagery of skipping a stone, and when you make a decision, all it takes is one person to make a difference. One person to stand up. And that one decision has a ripple effect. And once one person stands up, one becomes many. And here's my contact information. I would love to continue this conversation. One thing that I know for certain is my son and I have made it our priority before and after school. With time zones, it really works out great. To connect with other classrooms, to connect with families. And so I really welcome the opportunity to continue this conversation with you. I thank Maria from actually the bottom of my heart, that you are so committed and you are so passionate about bringing this conversation to your community, because it is just like that ripple effect. You have skipped a stone and it will continue to travel, and I love you. So thank you. Who do I give this to? And I'm hugging you.
Speakers from panel 1 can come in. I'm sorry we cannot hear the names because she's not wearing a microphone.
A ver, chicas, yo...
Hola, ¿qué tal?
Yo aquí.
Buenos días a todos.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Beatriz Garcia. I am a journalist and also I'm a mom. I have 2 little children. One of my daughters is 3 years old and she's already totally connected. It is a generation that lives has a dual reality, digital and in the real world. And many times we wonder if this is good, how to handle it. But many of us, there are data that tell us about the amount of people who have a smartphone. Most of us is the first thing that we look at when we wake up. Many studies tell you about how wrong it is to just go check your smartphone just before you go to bed, or wake up and just have a look at it the moment you wake up. And however, we all do it. And the way we handle technology, the digital world, is going to be the topic of this panel. We have here several experts that will give us many ideas to us parents and educators. And we also have 2 young girls, Valeria and Claudia, who are going to help us understand how they see this new life that for us is a gap. It might be a generational gap, but it's a digital gap, I would say. That, as Maria Zalbidea would say, a mother of 4 and great expert in the digital gap, she has learned, and I think she can teach us all how to create a network where we can all find our place and feel comfortable and help minors and our students acknowledgeable also for their digital life. I am talking also about students because we have here somebody who can help us understand how to get the best of the technological world. And this is Javier Gomez, who's a teacher of technology. And I hope that you will bring light and give us many ideas in order for us to face those school years. For instance, this year I had to look for a school for my daughter because she was starting school, and in many schools I found that many were already counting on technology. Many of them already have digital boards that they give a limited use to. And when I was looking for this school, I was wondering if this made any sense, if it made sense to limit the use of tablets, for instance, to students that can provide with so many resources to certain hours only. And I think Javier can give us a lot of light, can shed light on this. And one of the things that one of the parents was asking in the sessions that we attended to choose the school, if the if having access to so many screens for so long would be dangerous for children. And this is something that Ms. Lefa Eri could help us solve. She coordinates a clinic guide on cyberbullying, and this is one of the risks of being part of this digital race that brings about new ways of relating to other people. And she's going to help us with cyberbullying and many other aspects related to health. And also, Angel Luis can help us with the security, Angel Pablo, who's an expert in safety and security in the digital world. And I think that many of you, the younger people I see here in the audience, should pay a lot of attention, because maybe parents and educators have not taught you very well how to browse in the internet. There are many advices that you can follow, and there are many debates that we can open regarding this topic. And I hope that you feel free to ask questions and participate in this debate. And just in case the audience is not inclined to participate, I'm going to ask Claudia and Valeria if they can. I'm going to ask them several questions, and I'm going to start by asking them if they consider being connected as part of their lives or as an isolated aspect of their lives.
One of the first aspects was that people spent more than 2 hours online, and from 14 to 25, teenagers were included. It seems that we grow up late. They spent more than 3 hours. But a high percentage, up to a 30%, especially of people between 11 and 14 years old, didn't understand the question of how long they spent online, because their reality is to be connected, to be online. I don't know whether you have smartphones. Yeah, I do have a smartphone. I do have a smartphone too. Do your parents control you? Have they taught you how you have to use it, or you're free to do it? Well, they've taught me how to use it, but it's true that there are things that I can do on my own, or as I think it better fits. Well, in my case, they've taught me how to use it at the beginning, but now it's like I can do a little bit what I want. Well, Maria, I would like to ask you, because, well, you give many speeches about this topic. I've read many articles about you, media, journalists. Well, you know that we always focus on the bad things. So when are we going to buy a smartphone? Is it good to give a smartphone to a kid? Well, you've given many speeches about this. They are 11 and 12 years old. I guess that it is their first access to their own smartphone. I guess that it is, of course, it's a smartphone. Well, this is a silly question. Okay, yeah, of course they have internet. So, how is it possible to manage the access to these devices, and especially to the digital world, in kids? Well, yes, you're absolutely right. The good thing is that, well, these digital natives, they are not so called, because people say that these digital natives don't exist anymore. The first thing is, well, I would like to give a big round of applause, because we have children here and we are able to listen to them. We can learn from them, because I had never seen a forum, an audience, where we do this thing, and, well, we are able to talk to them directly and to listen to them. So I have 4 children. So they are usually at home, speaking, chatting, etc. But the fact of being able to listen to them, I think, is something amazing. So as we were saying, we have to sue that digital gap that separates us. Maybe it's bigger or smaller, but it's clear that we sometimes speak different languages, and we must know how to connect with them, to understand them, and we will be able to protect them that way. Well, when can we give a smartphone or a device to children? To children, sometimes we'll say that the sooner we make them participate with that technology, the better. I think that we have to introduce that in their lives as other educational elements. I think it's very difficult to say when we can buy a smartphone to a kid. Everybody's different. People who have children know that it's very difficult to say 12, 13, 14. My elder son has 14 and he doesn't have a smartphone yet. He's learning how to use technology, and for now he doesn't need it. But when I decide, or when we decide that he's going to need it, we must go with him. And I would like to ask them, if you agree, maybe because I'm a journalist too, how was the time? Well, I always say, and I always encourage parents, that when you put a smartphones on your kids' hands, because they'll have the world in their pocket, they will have access to everything. You say, oh, how about that action that as a mother, as a father, you give that device to your kids, you say, you explain how it can be used. Well, it is true that it's good to listen to the story that is behind this technology, so to speak. Well, in my case, when I was given that cell phone, it was some kind of contract that they told me how long I could use it, where I could use it, the things that I could do, and eventually had to sign, and I kept that contract. And for example, if I don't know if I can do some things or not, I have a look at the contract or I ask a question. Well, in order to have it, I said that I was going to spend for a week, to spend a week to know if I was going to be able to use it, and if I could use it, I would have it, and I was able to use it. I did, and I got it. Well, Angel Pablo, I don't know that following this story, I don't know whether you recommend that parents have this mirror smartphone, or to have these apps to have some kind of control to avoid the real and digital risks, so to speak. Well, as I'm the security leg, so to speak, on this table. So the world where I work, the security world, we always say that security does not exist 100%. So first of all, I would like to break a myth. They don't want a smartphone. They don't have a smartphone, a cell phone. Cell phone was to make a call. They have a pocket computer that understands her, that it's part of their their daily life. And the main problem is something that you have mentioned, the digital gap. The digital gap does not exist. This is my personal opinion. The digital gap does not exist. We have a gap where the adults are, and maybe we don't know anything about digital world. And I disagree a little bit with the way how she has got their cell phone. The children are usually experts. You only have to see how they use the tablet, the smartphone, and they are just babies, but they're not experts. If they see us doing this, they will do it too. But they don't know, and maybe adults don't know, that when we are giving them this technology and we leave them at their bedroom, we are always seeing, we are always watching something on TV, something interesting that can bother us. They are exposed to any risk, to any danger, like for example scams, depending on their age. Do you want to buy? Yes. And as we have our device synchronized with our credit card, that's a problem. Or maybe they tell us that they're playing a game and they tell us, Dad, Mom, whoever has stolen my sword. So what do we do when we're watching TV? So just leave me alone, please. Well, maybe this is why we're here. This is why we're holding this round table, to understand that it is our responsibility. But exactly the same when you give a bite, for example. This is why you're mentioning the gap. We have to learn how to teach them. Yeah, I always put that example. When you buy a bicycle to a kid, you put the little wheels, they wear a helmet. So, and children start to learn. They say, well, just take this little wheel away, etc. We have to give some technology to our children as they are born, but not leaving them alone. And do you think that, well, do you think that it is also the school's responsibility? I mean, the first example is parents. For babies, for example, my daughter with 3 years old, she starts to have a look, an analog picture, and she starts to, she tries to zoom it in with her fingers. But they have references that are inside that device. And fortunately, they have references at their classroom. How do you include that, or how do you think that this type of education should be included, both in terms of risks and benefits? Because I understand that it has many benefits. Let's chat a little bit about that. We are speaking about teaching, not educating. Okay, so this is the question: in the digital school, the modern school, are they partially responsible of this training, of this education? No, I'm just going to put an example, and maybe he's the expert on this. I won't give names, I won't give data, but I'm sure that here we have people from the director plan, from the national police world, people that work in cyber cooperation that Alberto has mentioned. How many schools have you gone to ask for free tools to train? Well, today they've told me, well, we don't need it. We don't have these problems here. So Javier, it's your turn now. Well, first of all, I think that we should understand the reality of schools in Spain as of today.
Las escuelas, la enseñanza siempre ha sido...
School has always been reluctant when introducing technology in the classroom, and they have controlled it until the mobile devices, because it was very easy to control it, because technology is not democratic, so to speak. It was not at every household, etc. But also, today we are seeing the situations, people that have a smartphone, it's not a cell phone, it's a computer, it's a portable computer, a laptop with access to a great bunch of information, and we are facing a situation where, whether we like it or not, this is a reality that children live in. And they have to help them, because eventually the school has to be a reflection of the society, and they have to train children to live in a society that is changing continuously and at a very quick pace. So how should we introduce it? Absolutely normal, because it's part of their lives. It's not something exceptional. It's not something that we have to be scared of. It is not something that we have to be used for very specific moments in time, and after that you lock them off of a world that they belong to, because they are permanently connected. We have to do it very normally. I mean, I always like to say that we have schools of the 19th century with teachers that are trained to teach in the 20th century with children that belong to the 21st century. And this can't be the case anymore. These children demand a training and a way of education that makes use of this type of technology, but in a normal way. How to do it? Well, we should have a full training program for teachers. This should be something usual at teachers' faculties, and it's not the case at all. Sorry, well, as I was saying, that it should be something normal. Teachers, faculties, the way of you have to work with children in a reality that is normal for them, and not to teach them making a gap, as you've mentioned, because children see that when they get into the school, it's something unknown for them. It's not their world. They feel like a stranger, so to speak. So they're accustomed to share, to use the WhatsApp as a way to learn, to use YouTube as in a very normal way to use social media, etc. So I think that school has to go through that way, obviously with basic safety guidelines, but this comes from a very good training to teachers, and it's time to do that, I think. Well, I guess that in that line you're saying, well, they get out and they get along or hang out through the WhatsApp. Okay, this is usually mentioned in media, etc. We can speak about gap, separation between the online relationships and offline relationships. Lifa is an expert in young psychiatrist, and I guess that during last years you faced or you found, I wouldn't say difficulties, but challenges when understanding these relationship problems that could exist. Do you think that technology or training that we teachers, parents, society are giving to children in terms of their digital relationships is affecting their offline relationships, their analog or physical relationships? Well, I think that there are some people that, because of being as they are, the teenagers, for example, if it's a person that doesn't have social skills, they will just take the online version because it's easier to get in touch with other people through the screen. But if it's a teenager that doesn't have any relationship problems, he will have his offline friends, and it will work perfectly in both worlds. So this could favor this person at some time, to favor offline relationships. Yes, well, this happens with us too. I mean, it's highly beneficial for all. We have lost some friends, and you have recovered them. You've got in touch with them after so many years. But we have to control these more fragile children because they are the ones that maybe are going to have problems in the net. So do you think these fragile children, first of all, is it possible to have, I mean, if the online version is a good thing for the offline line, do you think that it's going to be beneficial for them? And do you think that they are more exposed because the digital world is present during 24 hours a day? Because, well, do you think, what do you think about this? Well, I always say that this is not about technology, but about education. We're really speaking about technology, but we are still educating. The world has changed, society changes, multi-screen, we are moving at a very quick path, but we are still educating. When we were speaking about the first cell phone, etc., before thinking about what's the ideal age or how these girls or any of our children have got access to this pocket laptop or to this smartphone, we should think about since when and in which environment these children start to have this access to technology. For example, during a dinner, people start talking about apps, people start speaking about digital virtual reality. As a mother, I try to explain, first of all, to do it at home, but after that, to explain to parents that we can't wait to have that contact with social media and to struggle with our children to know when are we going to open our profile. For example, when they are 6 or 7 years old, they must know what's respect on the net or at home, if you have to buy an app or not, who's behind the technological companies, what tools do we have available. In fact, Maria Zabala always says that we have to normalize the technology chats at home. So when I speak about digital gap, it can be called digital gap or however you want to call it. It's different, but the separation that doesn't happen in our houses. At many houses, it's like when you start speaking about technology, the parents start to be scared. Well, we're starting to speak about smartphones, screen. No, please leave me alone. Leave me alone. No, that's not the point. When a kid tells you something about he is in the net, and for example, you start saying, "Well, you are absolutely hooked up on that. You are a lost generation." That kid won't be able to say anything about a problem that he has online if he sees that reaction on his parents. So I always try to make it normal, because technology is in our lives. It's not an online or offline relationship. It's a relationship. It's educating the world we will live in, because it's amazing. It has many risks. We have to minimize them, knowing them very well. But really, we have to talk to our children about technology with our students, and if we do that, when we get to that student that has these problems, we should bear in mind that many of the people that are here and the speakers that are here, we have met online. That's great. I mean, you're all great and you're behind a screen. So we shouldn't forget about the fact that the growth in terms of in our professional or human lives comes that way. We are speaking about children that have to be educated, and it is educating from an equal perspective. I mean, if our parents, if as educators we educate our children, they will be able to make good digital connections. That's my opinion. Okay, so let's give the floor to Claudia and Valeria. So what do you see at home? How do your parents use? I guess that they are around, so be careful with what you say, because, okay. So how do your parents use smartphones, tablets? What do you see at home? Hello? Yes. Well, my parents use the computer very much, because they work with it. And they're usually working at the computer when they come home. For example, do you watch TV movies, TV series? Do you play tablet games with them? I don't know whether they have social media where you are, if you can interact. Well, we will usually watch movies all together. Sometimes we watch TV at night. Well, at home, we usually chat about networks, about the risks that they have, and I know for sure that if I have any problem, I have to tell them, because they will help me. Do they have any social media? Yes, they do. They are in different media where I am too. Okay, cool. So at home, we watch TV shows, TV series, and my parents have social media, and they can see me on those media, and they use the smartphone and the computer to work. And sometimes we play, or virtual reality glasses, or my parents show me these things. I don't see that on the internet. They show me. And do you like this interaction, virtual reality glasses? I do want to. I do want that. Yeah, I do like it. I think it's very weird that you can go to a different place with just wearing a pair of glasses. I think it's very funny. It's weird, but it's funny. Well, in terms of social media, this is one of the challenges that the analog parents, so to speak, are facing. Even the analog teachers, or even the analog doctors or physicians, you have to face a generation that is 100% digital. So how to train in terms of social media when we are learning the thing before you post? Well, I think that do you think that that's enough for them, or you have to warn them beyond that? She said that her parents explain the social media, of the risks of the social media. I don't know whether you know the advantages of the benefits of getting in touch with people that you haven't seen for long. Well, they're too young for that, but how to train them to use social media when we are still learning? That's the point. Angel Pablo, yes? Okay, so let's make a point. Well, what's a social media? A social media is a place where you get in touch with other people. What people? Your friends. What's the concept of friendship? That's the point. How many friends do we have in social media? I always say that internet is good. The internet is good. Thanks to the internet, I've met many people. I think that there are some in the audience. We even have virtual meetings to speak about our stuff. So it's good. But the concept of friendship, if as a father, my son, my daughter comes along and tells me that someone has stolen that diamond sword and I don't pay attention to them, what are they going to ask to their friend that is in the social media or in that online game? So it's important to know who they are talking to and what they are talking about. I'm not speaking auditing to spying them, no. I'm not talking about that, but they must be aware of the fact that if they are speaking in a social network about chess, they don't have to say what's their name, where they live, where they're going on holiday. They all have to explain what we all do in social media. I guess that if I see them on the street and I ask them, what's your name? They won't tell me. But in social network, they will give me all the information. And they will use the social engineering to get more information. That's a bad point. Just with a picture, we'll have the geolocalization of where this picture is taken. Oh, send me a picture of you. Where do you live? No, I'm totally aware of where I am. Do you have a cat? Oh, send me a picture of your cat. No, I won't do that. And geolocation is about that. We have to train and we have to educate parents first so that parents educate children. Education. We are speaking about educations from the very beginning. Yes, Javier has said that even in terms of teachers. And just another remark. You both have social media, don't you? Yes. First of all, have you read all the terms and conditions, or your parents? Well, I know that you have done, but the rest of human beings, do they read the terms and conditions when they access a social network? Do you know how old you must be to access a social network in Spain? 14 years old. No, I'm going to forbid it. If you forbid it, and they don't do it at home, but they go somewhere else, and they get out of this comfort zone, and they go to their friends or to whoever's, and they create their profile in social media. People with 11 profiles on Facebook, for example, 11 profiles. It is true that many times I see that people, that some parents ask me, is it better to do it with 12 years old, being with them, or with 14 years old and leaving them alone because everybody at their classroom has a social media, etc. So I'm concerned about that. I try to be cautious, but sometimes you see parents that prefer to do it with 12 years old, being with them and reading all the terms and conditions of every social network, explaining the way of using it and the risks that they have, because, for example, there are social networks that have to do with pics, other ones that have to do with videos. Or do you want to do it with 14 years old alone, and maybe they do it at their friend's house without any kind of control? I mean, sometimes when they ask me for a recommendation, I say, well, I don't dare to recommend whether 12, 13, but you say, well, if you have a son or a daughter that is highly responsible, they have good marks at school, he likes animals, and he wants a social media where he always sees the pictures of Madrid Zoo, for example, you can be with him, you can follow him on that social network. It doesn't have to do with how old they are. I guess maybe you can find that there's a student that say, well, for example, if I leave this guy to do whatever he wants in YouTube, I open a Gmail account to access video, I don't want to think about what could happen with his marks or whatever. So it depends on the people. Legally, yes, 14 years old. But I think that almost nobody reads the terms and agreements because they are written not to read them. Okay, it's quite difficult, as they must be aware that when they have any trouble, they must tell it to their parents. But the adults have to be prepared not to know what that sword, that diamond sword is, but to give an answer. Okay, so this window, when my mother went through the window and she told me, where you are? No, come up.
Javier, I don't know if your students might be very representative for this, but what would you say? Do you think that there are digital babysitters for children also in the classroom? Do you find it more difficult for them to pay attention because they are so used to pay attention to at so many things at the same time? Yesterday, a colleague was telling me that her daughter was not allowed to take the mobile into her room, and last summer she did. She is a very good student, has very good grades, she is socially well adapted, she doesn't have any issues. And one day she allowed her to take her mobile into the room while she was doing her homework, and she caught her, in quotes, using her WhatsApp. And she asked her, what are you doing using WhatsApp? You have to study. No. She said that her daughter said, well, some friend had a question and we're finding the solution between the two of us. And I think this is a very good example of how we need to incorporate new technologies and the digital world to that extent, even in the classroom. Would you agree with that, Javier? Of course. That example that you just told us is very good, because this girl did something that comes totally naturally to her. She is connected to a friend who has a question, and they're connected with a tool that allows them to connect and to resolve all these questions. And obviously, we need to accompany children when they start using technology. And I liked what you said, because you were telling us that it's more about education than about technology. With all the changes that there are in technology nowadays, we cannot really commit to only one nowadays, because we really don't know what's going to happen in 4 or 5 years. If there's going to be a new technology that will revolutionize everything that we know. A few years ago, the closest thing to a smartphone that we had was a Nokia phone, and nowadays Nokia is a brand that is being relaunched right now, but that in only 10 years almost disappeared. In 10 years we've had Facebook, we have Twitter, we have other social media, and we have incorporated them into our regular day-to-day life. How to use this inside the classroom? Well, there are so many ways to give them wonderful uses in the classroom. We were talking before about the use of Skype, but to connect students in different classrooms in different parts of the world. This is just wonderful. The use of WhatsApp to connect students from the same group to help each other, to do collaborative work. Among the digital environments that we're using for teaching inside the classroom, there are chats, there are forums that students can use in a safe manner with the help of their teacher, where they can work collaboratively with projects that they're being asked for by the teachers. So it's what you were saying before. You cannot just provide children with a smartphone and just think that since they're digital natives, they will do well. The example that you said before with the bicycle is very good. We need to accompany our children in this process and make it look natural. It's not a punishment. It's not a prize. It's simply another part of their regular life, and it needs to be there at all times. I think that what you talk about is supervision, monitoring. The example about the bicycle, the television. My mother, for instance, told me that she brought television to her small village and everybody would come to see it, and many older people were worried because children were not playing on the street anymore. And there are contents that are not filtered, that can be filtered, but that we need to teach children to filter these content. I don't know if Lefa finds any queries about the contents that children have had access on the internet. Yes, there are truly many contents that could be dangerous. I was going to ask you about the positive ones, but let's talk about them both. Obviously, they have access to a whole amount of information. In school, they are taught to which pages where they will not be faced with fake news or distorted news, and I think it's in the school where they can help them with this. What I find in my office is the difficulties in people do not come to my consultation to tell me about the good things. What about the attention issues? Because this is one of the things we mention a lot when we talk about the new generations. There seem to be some studies, some researchers that seem to prove that there is a great difficulty to keep attention because we're always changing the source of information. There's a disease, syndrome regarding the lack of attention. It was described in the beginning of the 20th century. So this has always been there, and it's not the fault of technology, but it's true that technology might make it more difficult to us to pay attention to things because we as adults are always walking with our smartphones in our hands, and we are responding a WhatsApp message, for instance, and we might try to cross the street when we shouldn't. It steals our attention, but obviously the lack of attention is not due to this. Would you say this is a wonderful, in quote, wonderful source for medicine to find a way to teach this, focusing the attention? Yes, obviously medicine is dealing with this, and the capacity of focusing depends on each person. Some people can really manage to focus easily. However, not everyone can. What about schools? I suppose that it's basic and vital that this technology is used in the schools, and I think teachers need to help and support, and obviously in the same way that parents need to learn, because we were not born knowing about this, and it's only very recently that we have been facing this technology. And I suppose that many teachers, obviously from my generation, they need to learn in order to be able to teach and to accompany. Many times, I think my children go to a wonderful school, but I would like to always have a teacher like Javier with my students, with my children. As Lefa was saying, this needs to be done at school, but as parents, we cannot just put all the responsibility in the hands of school. Obviously, teachers and parents need to work together because we have to educate our children. However, the logical part is that the teachers are aware and know many web pages and websites that are really good for their children, so they can guide their students and the children. Parents in general, they need to educate, but also teachers more specifically in terms of the contents for the topics. But we're talking about accessing dangerous topics. I always tell them to not to ask Google or Siri what you would like to be asked as a teacher or as a parent. If children ask Google things that they have not been told at school, for instance, once I was explaining something to one of my children, something very specific, and he told me, well, what you're telling me has nothing to do with what I found on the internet. So what we tell them in our houses might not have anything to do with what they see in the internet, which is the whole world. The challenge is that houses and schools cooperate and work as a team so that we get from the school all the filters on the contents that we need to have at hand when we have children that are using constantly the iPad in the classroom. I wanted to highlight that even more important than to give them a simple list of websites that they need to check on is to provide them with the skills so that they can actually decide by themselves what content is valid for them. An example which is very basic, Wikipedia. Nobody can grant that the Wikipedia contents are updated, valid, or that are appropriate for the age of the child who's checking it. A 12-year-old child is different from an older child, and they need to have contents adapted to their knowledge and the skills and their age. So what we need to tell them is how to look for things, how to filter. And here we need to have a team of parents and school and teachers to work together. Sometimes teachers are asking their students to carry out projects, and we tell them, go into the internet, and what we need to tell them is how to filter these things. What about you, girls? When you go into the internet, do you check the internet with your parents? Do you work on your own? Personally, I look for things in the internet. When I don't understand a word, I just go to my computer and I look it up. And if not, I would ask my parents. Not that I don't tell my parents, but first I look for things, and later I tell them how I've done it, where I've done it, so that they can see that I haven't visited any weird pages. But I'm not going to go into the internet when I'm next to my parents. I just go to my computer. See, this is what I meant. This is part of their regular life. What you tell us about asking the parents first is something that they don't even think of. But I go further. We don't even think about it in any conversation that we might have. When somebody doesn't remember the name of an actor, for instance, we just look it up. So we need to accept that this is part of their lives. And secondly, we need to know that we cannot really limit them, but maybe we need to get into what they do. Angel Pablo and Lifa, I don't know if in your consultation in your office you find parents, since you are an expert in psychiatry for children. Do you find any parent asking you about this? And in the lectures that you deliver, I suppose that you find many people who are asking about who are the baddies, as you were saying, are the bad pages, because we don't know where they are. Well, there are bad pages and good web pages, but when you go for a query, you have a query in Google, not everything that you ask, you get, not all the results are related to what you're asking for. Once, somebody told me that a grandparent said to me that when I let my mobile phone to my granddaughter, sometimes when I get it back, I see that she has checked adult content web pages, and my granddaughter doesn't still read. Of course, when he gave her the mobile phone, the kid would input some words like "but," and then she would get very many bad results. So exactly what we need to do is teach them how to make the difference between what's good and what's bad. In May in Spain, for instance, last year, there was this game on the media that was called the blue whale. In Spain, there had not been any cases about the blue whale. Everybody was wondering what's the blue whale and thinking how nice this is. This is a cool game. And then some cases started appearing in Spain. There are other cases like fashions. For instance, the bucket of water on throwing a bucket of water on you and then pouring boiling water over you, and that was not so funny anymore. And these are the type of fashions that we can encounter today, and we need to teach them how to make the difference between what's good and what's bad. We need to make them understand that when they look something up in the internet through the smartphones, they might get to contents that are not appropriate for them. So they need to understand when they have to dismiss this content, or to tell their parents, I've gone to look for this and I found this other thing that is not so good. And parents and teachers need to make their children and students understand what's good and bad. Regarding the blue whale, when this piece of news came about, I was with a group of parents, and when we started the session, I introduced myself, and I put a picture with a whale painted with a roller pen, and there were about 40 parents there. And only one told me, I think it's something about the blue whale that they draw on their arms. So what I thought is that each of us is an actor that contributes to raise awareness in society and among teachers and educators. So our challenge is how to start a conversation with your children or with your students when you see a piece of news like this on the media. Because not all parents and teachers are involved in this process of making the digital world easier. So we need to encourage parents to start a dialogue over dinner about things like this, like the blue whale, to ask if our children know about this, if they have heard something in the school, if they know of any cases. So instead of just panicking when we read this piece of news, or just sit down with them at some given time and explain them, this is how you look up things in the internet or whatever. We just need to use the news that come on the newspapers, on the TV, on the internet, and use these as opportunities to teach our children how to have conversations with our children, so they know how to handle these situations. It's a bit like putting the Band-Aid before the wound. Normally, what parents are concerned about is addiction. We see addiction every day. There are very few children who are addicted, but when you really ask about the way their children use it, you see that there's a regular use. It's nothing to be alarmed about. So very few parents feel that their children will become addicts. And what do you tell them when they tell you that? I start asking them how their children use the smartphones. And children tell you, I use them to look up information. Many boys tell us that they use it to play, and girls usually tell me that they use it just to chat and the WhatsApp. And when you see that the amount of time that they devote to using their smartphones, you try to appease their parents. What do you consider an addicted minor? A child who is addicted is somebody who spends over 5 hours with their smartphone, but beside the time is a person who needs to have his mobile or her mobile phone and is anxious when they don't have it, and when they grab it, they calm down and they feel more comfortable. Before, when they didn't have it, they couldn't study, they were anxious, like a person who needs a cigarette. And after they inhale for the first time their cigarettes, they feel appeased. However, there are many children who are at risk of becoming addicted because they spend 2-3 hours not looking up information or watching a video, but only playing. And when a minor spends many hours, but as you say, they use it to be connected with their classmates, well, that's a natural thing. When my daughters were teenagers, I was desperate because I could never call my house. I had 4 daughters and my telephone was always busy. And of course, there were no mobile phones back then. So the first thing they did when they got home was call their friends. And I didn't understand why they had to call each other all afternoon. And now the difference is that we are all connected through the chats, but it's exactly the same thing. Well, actually, it's a way of promoting relationships and learning. It's something that is part of the education. Claudia, Valeria, do you use your smartphones or tablets to be connected with your friends? Do you do what we used to do in the 80s and 70s to just go to a corner so that nobody would hear you speaking with your friends? Do you also need that? Me, I cannot say I need it. I meant that you liked it. Yes, I like to talk with my best friends or my classroom group. Sometimes they ask me to send them pictures about homework because they forgot, or if somebody has a query about an exam. And it's true that I use mostly WhatsApp rather than games, but if I'm not using it, I'm not really using my smartphone 5 hours a day to talk with my friends. When I arrive home, I have a snack, and normally I talk with my best friends. Sometimes we study together in FaceTime, doing FaceTime, and we ask each other questions. Sometimes we do our homeworks together and we chat. But I'm not using my mobile phone all the time. I usually use it to talk with my friends instead of playing. I would also mention here that it's not only about time, but also the contact, the company, and the place. When they talk about the screen time, we talk about the mobile, but we can also talk about the PS4, for instance. It's not the same to play Call of Duty than another type of game. It's not the same to be playing with your father or your mother than playing on your own, to be in the living room than alone in your room. So there are many other factors that are important as well that you need to take into account to decide if you need to play more or less, or to access this or that content. People, when they ask about this, they want to have clear-cut answers, but it's not as easy as that. At some point, it's difficult to decide when you're dealing with teenagers, and sometimes it's difficult to educate children. It's you need to take into account the mood in which they are, if they're chatting about what they're going to wear, when they're going to go out, or you need to understand all these little things, all these factors. We're also talking about gaming as if it were something negative, and it's quite the opposite. To learn through games is the most effective way of learning. Last year, I did a master's in a very important business school, and it called my attention that I was surprised that the first thing they asked us to do is to we started by playing, and it's a strategy that I think it's very important to start some learning and to be motivated. Video games is going to be the next revolution in teaching. A few days ago, I was talking about with a colleague about a saga that Assassin's Creed, and they recreate very precisely the environments. The next one is about Egypt, and you will be able to use it for education. You will visit places that have been recreated almost up to the centimeter, and there you will be able to understand their culture, to understand the way the Egyptians lived. If we move this into the future, where you can actually feel that you're inside these environments, and I don't think that anybody would say, I don't want my son or my daughter to learn this way because I just want them to learn by heart this text. I don't think this is healthy. I think it's much better to be able to interact with the environment, because education is all about that. Yes, the connection that you create with a student or with a child when at some point you take him or her to a website of a place where he can have a virtual tour of a place that you cannot visit for whatever, maybe not the Louvre, but the connection that you create when you take your child to a place that he might like and he can connect or she can connect with it, or a person who can, for instance, love somebody who loves opera, and the possibility of having streamed videos with this music. This is wonderful for education and even for ourselves. We can really use it for the things that we like. It's obvious that games are good depending on the content of the games. There are violent games and adult games that are not appropriate for the young ones, but we also need to take into account if they're online or offline games. I would like to ask if a child playing Parcheesi is dangerous if they play online. It doesn't seem to be dangerous, and in fact we would let them play Parcheesi online in the rooms while we're still watching whatever we want on our telly in the living room. But we need to be aware that there's a live chat in that game, and who's my son or my daughter playing with, and who's chatting with my son or my daughter. Hunters go hunt in the forest, fishermen go to a river, to the sea, and where do cyber predators go to find their prey? I would like to ask the audience if this has scared everyone as it scared me, or do you all think that we can handle this somehow? Please participate, and even if you want to change this topic, please feel free to do it. I am certain that if we are afraid, we won't get anywhere. I think we need to feel respect and we need to have a lot of information. But I have two teenager daughters, and I never tell them about fear, but I tell them about prudence, about knowledge, about being careful, about considering the ifs in their lives that will determine their behavior both online and offline. So if we talk about fear, I think that scares us, that puts a distance between us, and I think that we need to take the positive part of technology. It's not about fear, it's about knowledge. Sometimes we have a wrong idea of what the virtual world is. We need to be aware of the risks. We need to be aware of the risks, of the capabilities, and to mitigate them we need to be aware of the risks to avoid them as much as possible. Something important is to have a good communication between parents and children, so that if they at some point they felt that something was a bit cringy, they need to talk about it with their parents, because parents are the first who can tell, well, I don't like this. And if there is no communication about this in the family, they will not talk about it. Because if the environment is always the children are told off about this, they will not tell their parents about what's going on. One of the last studies of UKids Online, they said that to chat with your children is the best parental filter. And I thought, yeah, that's great, because sometimes we just talk about what apps we're using in our mobile, and we need to go back to the fact that this is education. When there is trust in the family, when there's something wrong in the internet, when they see that when they were looking for a word on Google and they find something totally different from what they were expecting, they would tell you. Some children are more introvert than others, but that's the role of the educator and the parents, to make children talk about what they have seen and experienced in the internet. And yes, this is the point where parents come to see me, exactly. Good morning. My name is Camilo. I come from the Educational Association Atlantis. I would like to mention two things. There's a part of what Javier has said, which is the technology in education that needs to be in a wide way. My son is in a school that is very advanced in terms of technology. They use virtual goggles to teach history and other topics. And now, when my child goes to a different school next year to go to high school, he will be expelled from the school for using his smartphone in the classroom, because there are schools that are ready and teachers that are qualified, but there are schools that are not ready, and teachers who have not been trained for this teaching technology. And it's important to use the smartphones in the classroom. My son is 14 years old, and he thinks that the most important part in a sentence is not the verb, is the hashtag. This means that technology is everywhere, and I think that's something that we need to work a lot on, which is to make the system or the teacher training need to change a lot.
Aquí algo también es importante es un poco.
There's something important here that we work here in Spain. It's true that for many years we have said that we are betting on making the school and the classroom digital, and even the teacher making it digital. But what we have done in an habitual way is to introduce stuff, so to speak, but we are not training the teachers to use them. So I would ask you, if you have children, if you go to their classroom and they have a digital blackboard, how they're going to use it? They will use it to project something. They won't use its potential. So we have tablets, we have digital blackboards, etc. But we are not training the teachers, and we have to focus on that. The structure is important, but we have to train the teachers, and we have to bet on a quality education. Yes. The piece of information 12 years ago, Facebook didn't exist 12 years ago. And they were starting to be trained in CIT. So they still have to keep training. I'm just speaking about ICT, about ICTs. And I know that a teacher that has to stick to a curriculum, he has to do it. I mean, don't put more load on that. So I get back to suing again. It's just to put together all the contents that are recursable with all these this world. So let's give the floor to the two last questions. Maria, and after that, and the gentleman here, your question, and the gentleman here, and we'll close the round table, okay? Yeah, Maria first. Well, have the mic. I don't know whether to make a question or not. Well, just a remark. Maria's idea about responsibility is great, and I think that as we are here with a mic, we are a little bit responsible. The scientific evidence says that the digital gap exists. What is not scientific evidence is the Premsky's concept that speaks about digital native or digital people, and the scientific evidence says that these characteristics are not true. For example, someone that has been born in the digital society with a device in their hand doesn't mean that make a critical use of this device, and I highlight the word critical because we are holding this discussion. If we move to the paradigm of innovation and we move to Silicon Valley, one of the arguments that is used is that children from the people that work at Silicon Valley go to school where there's no technology because they have it at home. So they don't need the school to contribute that additional knowledge. In Silicon Valley, what they read, what is being read about, it's about ethics and philosophy of technology. Why? Because it gives you that critical perspective from the Digicom framework that has been developed from 2006. In the key competencies for the citizens of the 21st century, we have the digital competence. For example, the Basque government has done a very interesting work where this competence is divided in 21 sub-competencies, and one of the weakest areas is safety. And that's true. Everybody has problems with safety. There is a lot of literature about this, and I understand that here we're chatting, etc. But sometimes I think that we should have different criteria, because at public universities in Spain, it is where I work. I work at the University of Murcia in didactics and school organization. That I know a lot of teachers. There's a teacher here that's called Salome Recio, that is an innovative teacher that makes a very effective use of technology, but I don't highlight technology because she fosters a methodological change. This is what you were talking about. It's not the stuff, it's what it provokes. And today we have to think about the fact that we need a methodological change in school, because the teacher's role is not the same anymore. I don't have all the information. Of course I should, but I don't have it. Not just me. And Wikipedia, I let my students at their works at classroom, etc., they can quote Wikipedia because it has a much bigger community than Salvat Encyclopedia used to have. And it's a community that uses the concept of collective intelligence. Of course, I can log in and put a mistake. How long will that mistake to be corrected? If I put something that is not correct, how long did Salvat Encyclopedia in solving their errors? And why what we can find in a book is true and what we can find on the internet is not true? And following what Javier has said, and congratulations because your remarks have been great, it's the same again. It's about the skills that we must give the students, not to tell them about the fact that these pages are fake, etc. We have to give them this critic capability that we must have in the digital world. It seems that I'm pissed off, but I'm not. Okay? No, I'm not. I'm not. Thank you very much. We're running out of time. I guess that we can keep on discussing during our short break. There's a coffee break. Yes, there's a coffee break. So we can keep on chatting. Thank you very much, you all. Thank you very much, girls. It's been a pleasure to have you here to share your point of view. and we hope that we all keep using well all the devices that are in our hands. Thank you very much to you all.